Well, after 2 whole years, The Missing has finally returned with new characters and a much more compelling mystery.
For you to come home.
Hey guys, remember the season premiere of The Missing, Series 2, Episode 1, Come Home. And guys, I was very much looking forward to this premiere. As you guys know, The Missing is a show that hasn't been on like a long time. The last time it was on was 2014, and I reviewed that a while ago. So we're talking like a while since I've really covered the show. But yes, I do cover this show. If you guys didn't know, I do. I reviewed every episode of Series 1, and Series 2 at the time, I really didn't want it because Series 1 was such an unsatisfying conclusion that I really didn't know what they were going to do with the Series 2, and I didn't really know if I wanted another version of it. However, over time, I've kind of come to love that ending, and I was definitely seeing where they were going to go with Series 2, and I have to say that Series 2, this premiere, it wasn't perfect. I definitely will say that. There was one fatal flaw that I think kind of undermines a lot of the premiere and could have made it a lot better. But as a premiere, this was really well done, I have to say. They really did all they could to make it something different, but also trying to keep, as The Missing. It's just a very different kind of show, and that was something I was very impressed with overall. But let's just get in this episode and talk about everything that happened, because there is definitely a lot to cover in this episode. Now, this episode actually is two different timelines, so I'm going to do this review a little bit differently than I do with other reviews. I'm going to talk about everything that happened in one timeline, and I'll talk about the other timeline, so we'll get into that, but we start off in Eckhausen, Germany, where this season takes place, but we see a group of kids at recess. One of the kids goes away from the crowd and looks like he's about to walk into oncoming traffic. He goes down to the woods and sees his sister, who has recently gotten a tattoo and is smoking, and he says he still can't believe their dad didn't torture her for doing that. She says that he shouldn't creep up on people, and he asks if it hurts, and she says not really. He asks if he can have one, and she tells him to go away. He says their mom and dad will go mental if she keeps bugging off like this, and she walks through an opening into the fence, walks into the woods, where we see another girl is walking simultaneously. The girl then walks down a street while the other one looks dazed and battered. I mean, the other one we see, she's in a complete state of confusion. I mean, she looks like she's been probably drugged and raped and all kinds of things like that. And before she can walk away any more steps, she passes out, and this huge crowd of people go up to her to see what's happened. She's put into an ambulance where a German woman asks for her name. The girl says to help her. The woman asks if there's someone she can call for, and all this girl says is Sophia Garax. Now, we don't know who Sophia Garax is, but the woman asks who that is. She says they'll try to find her and ask for her name, and we then get this amazing revelation where we realize that we weren't watching two girls simultaneously. This is the same exact girl who was planning on running away, and just that opening in general is so chilling and just so crazy to think about, that this girl clearly ran away, something terrible happened to her, and now she's returned. I thought they did an incredible job with that, and it perfectly thrusts us into the craziness of this story. So we then go to 2014, where we meet Gemma Webster, who's teaching a German class about slavery, and she's then visited by a few military men along with a search warrant, and another man working in the school tells Gemma he'll take over her lesson for her, and the woman who goes to her says her name is Sergeant Eve Stone, and says that she's with the military police 5th Investigation Company, and the man, Jorn Lenhart, that's with her, is from the German police. So Eve tells her about the young woman collapsing on Lindenstrasse and was taken to Hanover Hospital and is stable now, and claims that she is none other than her missing daughter, Alice Webster. So Gemma goes to her husband, Sam, who's also a soldier, and tells him of the news, and Lenhart drives him to the hospital to meet with her, anxiously, obviously, because she hasn't seen her daughter in years, and we're then reintroduced to now ex-detective Julian Baptiste. Now, this is a very hard task to do. On most miniseries, you have characters, and they're different characters every year. The Missing is taking a slightly different approach to that. It is new characters, and it is a new setting, but it is sort of a continuation of the first series, and, when you have one character, the only character who's been in the show, there's only one character who's been in a previous season, it's kind of hard to do that with, but I think they did it pretty well here with showing, Julian's involvement in this season. So his daughter Sarah is watching a video regarding the unsatisfying case of Oliver Hughes, which I thought was really well done. I liked the way he talked about how, some cases just you don't get the results you wanted, and that's kind of what happened with the season finale of season 1 for me, was the way that turned out. But he comes in, tells her if he cannot give them honey, he can at least bring firewood. And his wife Celia says he tried, and he says he failed, so fail again, fail better, or simply adapt. So Sarah said it's not every day someone makes a film about someone, which is called The Great Detective Baptiste, and he says to spare them, and he tells him that he'll get the rest of the wood. And Sarah doesn't really understand, why he's so upset by this. There's this documentary celebrating all he's done. Why does this affect him so much? And Celia says it's been almost a year since Chaland Dubois, and in that time, he's just been sitting around, and Sarah says it's just a documentary, and Celia says that he thinks it's his obituary. He acts like this is, something that's plagued him and that has ruined his entire life. And we know this, we had something very similar to this in series 1. So the Webster family goes to the hospital where Lenhart tells them that surgery was performed last night, and if they wouldn't have gotten to her when they did, she probably would have died. And he says she had a ruptured appendix and the surgery has left her tired and she's still recovering from the anesthetic. They go to see her, and Alice wakes up and calls out to Sam, and he goes to her. And the actors who played Sam and Jem did such an incredible job with just seeing the grief and seeing their relief and seeing their daughter alive and well. They haven't seen her in so long, and they're in such disbelief that she's actually alive. You can just tell. And they basically says to look at his little girl. He tries to take her hand, but she regrets it. And Alice says it's too bright in there. Sam closed the curtains, and Gemma sees her and says they've waited 11 years. She can't believe they found her. And Alice says that neither of them have changed. And Gemma says that she remembers when she did the burn in her bedroom, and they were all angry about it. And the next week, she wasn't there anymore. So she kept thinking what an awful waste of time to argue over something so meaningless. And that's basically, what got her to run away, was them arguing over this burn on her hand, which I think there's definitely more to it than that, but they definitely do allude to the fact that she is a bit rebellious, and because of that, that's kind of what made her the way she is. So Matthew then goes to her, and Alice says she'd like to be on her own now since this is too much for her to process, and Gemma says she doesn't have to talk if she doesn't want to, and Sam says they'll be right outside if she needs anything. So they leave, and Gemma wonders what's happened to her in the time she ran away, because obviously she's changed a lot. I mean, this isn't the same girl that left. She seems like she's been very affected by whatever happened to her. So Eve then calls Julian and tells him where she's from, asks if he knows the name Alice Webster, and he says that she was abducted in 2003, and Eve tells him she came back yesterday, walked right into the middle of the town square, and tells him she said the name Sophie Urox, and she says she knows how it all happened so many years ago, but he was the lead detective on her abduction, and they don't know how long it's going to be until she's well enough to talk. So she was hoping that maybe he could find a link between the two girls. So this is basically how he's going to come out of retirement. At this point, they did such a great job with setting up that Julian's essentially done. He doesn't really want to do this anymore, and he's at the point where he just feels like, his efforts to find all these missing children, they haven't done anything because he keeps getting these very unsatisfying cases, and he's trying to move on, but something just keeps pulling him back in, and you see that very well here. So he asks if she thinks the same person that took her also took Alice, and Eve says they think it's likely. Julian says this could mean there's a chance they find Sophie, and he says he's retired now, but will help her, and tells her to let him look at his files and see what he can learn. She thanks him for his time, and he asks how Alice is, and she says alive. And that's a very good way to put it. I mean, we don't really, Alice clearly is not okay, but she is at least alive. So Alice in the hospital wakes up gasping for air. Eve looks at this sonogram that makes us realize that Eve's actually pregnant, which that was a really cool reveal, the way they did that. And Julian's at home contemplating what to do with the case, and Alice then tells her that after the van stopped, the man opened the door, put a bag over her head, and it was a dark plastic bag. She couldn't see or breathe, and every time she screamed, it sucked the plastic into her throat. He put her over his shoulder, carried her, and she felt him tie her hands behind her back. He told her if she did what he said, he'd take her back to her parents, and Eve asked if this was the man who kept her, as if he spoke in English, and Lenhart asked if he had an accent, and Alice says that he's German, and we get a lot of information in this scene, but it's information that we need. We want to know what happened to Alice, and Eve asks if she ever saw his face. She says when she told him to take her home, he told her to stop crying, but she couldn't, so he hit her twice, then pulled down her skirt, and that was the first time he raped her, and hugged her afterward, just put both of his arms around her, stroked her hair, and told her that he'd always be her first. And Sam walks out of the room, just not able to bear any of these details. I mean, just imagine what he's going through. It's really tough to think about, and he goes into the bathroom, pounds on the wall, and cries, realizing what his daughter's been through. And it's a very introspective moment, which the show does an extremely good job with. Is, really great character development. That's a great example of that, the way they really show his character and, his devotion for his daughter. So Eve then asks Alice about Sophie, and she says she doesn't remember saying what she said. And Eve then asks if she has any idea where she may be right now. Alice says she was so weak he hadn't fed her in ages, and she promised that she'd come back for her. So we can tell these two definitely did have some sort of a relationship. The question is, who's Sophie and how does this really connect to Alice? That's something that we still don't know, and that is definitely more of a much more compelling mystery than what we had going on in season 1. So he goes to a directory and asks for Alice Webster, and then realizes that he's gone to the wrong place. So Lenhard then introduced the Websters to Carla Becker, who is a clinical psychologist in Hanover, and Carla says that they contacted her when they first heard the nature of this case, and she'll be providing the counseling their daughter. With need, she'll speak with her every day, and it will take time since they can't rush such a thing, but they should know that doctors performing the appendectomy found stretch marks, and there are other signs that indicate their daughter has actually given birth. So yes, Alice could very well be pregnant, we find out, which is crazy to think about, but that's very much what could be going on here. So they're obviously crushed hearing this news, and we then get introduced to this black teen character. We don't know who he is, but he sees blood in his kitchen floor. He quickly does whatever he can to clean it up, and we don't really know what's up with that, but Julian meets with Eve and asks how far along she is. She says 8 months, and he says he's convinced it's a girl. She asks what he's doing here since she thought he retired. He says the receptionist has no record of Alice, and since he sees no journalist, he most presumes that her return has been kept secret. And Eve says the last thing the girl needs is any more stress. He says there's only so long the glow of police into the hospital can go unremarked open. There's only so long they can do that. Eventually, something's going to leak out, and that's something that they need to keep in mind. And he says he wishes nothing but peace for the girl. He says she asked him to look into the Garak's case file, not to come out to Germany, which, yeah, that's all she wanted to do. She didn't literally tell him, come to Germany. And he says he's only asking to speak with her. She says she's too unwell to have more people questioning her, and he asks if she has spoken. Eve tells him about her being held captive with Sophie, and Julian asks where they were being kept. So Eve says they were moved around, and all Alice remembers is being left in the forest, where she walked for hours till she found the road, where exactly she's not sure. But he asked if there was a yellow van involved in her abduction. Since that was the only clue they had for Alice's. And Eve says she said enough already. He says she doesn't want to interfere with her investigation, but he made her the parents of Sophie a promise that there is no one that knows that case better than him, and says she's looked him up, knows who he is and what he's done, and says to let him help, and she says she appreciates it, but it's not necessary. So the difference is he actually does have to take a step back this time, because he's not the only one in pursuit of this case. Eve is the one who is, basically the head investigator, and he really isn't needed here. So it's kind of sad to see. But we then meet Daniel Reed, who is at his father Henry's funeral. He sees a woman that's clearly unwanted, and and we don't know what that's all about, but Gemma goes to the hospital. Sam says they need to talk to Alice, they need to give Alice some clothes because she's coming home with them tonight, and Gemma tells her that there's no rush. She's allowed to stay as long as she needs, and Alice says what she needs is to come home. He says he's spoken to the doctors, and it's fine. It's just an appendix routine, and one night is easy enough. And Gemma says she needs help, any help that she can get. And he says shrinks will come to them every day now that she's made up her mind. She's given the police everything that they need. She needs to be somewhere safe since she's been through enough, and it's time she came home where she belongs. So clearly, he thinks this is a good idea, but we can see definitely just Gemma has some doubts about. She just feels that, Alice not coming back is not a great idea, and that doubt does really start setting in a little bit later on, which we'll talk about. So the police are then conversing about a photo that they have found that has been issued in every newspaper by the evening edition, and Major Getrick says if they're going to keep Alice's identity withheld as long as possible, they need some sort of strategy. They don't want her to have to, be exposed to the public and have all this media coverage. They just don't want that for her. She was just found. They don't want her to have to deal with that. So Brigadier Adrian Stone says that Alice's identity will eventually break out. They can spare her and her family the intrusion for as long as possible, and if they work together, he says he has over 5,000 men and women in this garrison ready to help, and he tells the man that he was a detective on this case, and he saw how, it shook the whole damn place, and he watched his army and police butted heads, and again, over who is in charge, and they need to remember Sophie is still out there somewhere, and the two of them are now in a position to do something about it, and Engel agrees that with their help, they can begin the search immediately, and I like the way he was able to convince him. I like the way that was done. So even as Adrian, who actually we find was her father, and if he's serious about them working together, he says he can be a stubborn bastard, but he's got his head screwed on and knows how important a case like this is. She says that she should really be on leave right now, not stuck in the middle of something like this. He feels that she should be on leave, and she says she's fine. He says her sister would have killed him for saying that, and she asks if he told her, and he says he will. It's his job to worry about her, not the other way around. And a bunch of police side then go searching for Sophie. The Websters go home. Alice sees the picture of her and Matthew as kids, and Gemma tells her the doctor said that there were signs that she had a baby, and Alice says she doesn't know what she's talking about, and Sam asks if she wants something to eat. Alice says she's too tired for it. They take her up to her room, and this is a very well done scene, tells her that they kept all her things there. Gemma says every Christmas they wrote her a letter to her wherever she was, letting her know what they were doing that year, and Sam asks if it's okay if he gave her a hug, and she says of course he can. He hugs her, they wish her goodnight. It's a very tender moment, just realizing that he hasn't been able to hug his daughter in so long, and slowly starting to open up to her. Then we get to the ending, though, where Alice is in her room, she's looking around the various things, but Gemma's in looking through her photos one night, and something's not clicking in, just something about Alice. It doesn't seem like this is the same girl. They see Alice sleeping on the floor, and that's really all there is to talk about for this part of the episode. However, that's not all that happens in this episode, because even though we do have stuff going on in 2014, that's not the only timeline we are focusing on this episode, because we also cut throughout the episode, not just in this one part, we cut throughout almost the entire episode to 2016, which then was the current time, because in the UK this premiered last year. Of course it's premiering this year, so it's kind of inconvenient, but we do go to 2016, and I do think that this was well done. I don't think this was bad, but I do feel that a lot of the mysteriousness of what happened in 2014 was kind of lost here. We'll get into that, where Julian, we see, is now bald in Iraqi, which that was very jarring to see, and he goes to this man named Bagheer. He asks him how far to Kirkuk, and Bagheer says 1 to 2 hours, but he should know it's no place for tourists. Julian says that he isn't one, and in Eckhausen, Germany, we see Gemma tells Sam to get up, says he can't be late, says Matthew is planning on visiting Alice this afternoon, and she was hoping that they could all go, and he says he'll try, and she tells him not to strain himself. He gets dressed and then sees Matthew go into a car with a few guys who they look like, I think they're junkies, I can't really tell, they're possibly white supremacists, I don't really know. Gemma says he should talk to him, and we can see immediately there's some sort of rift in Matthew and Sam's relationship. Something happened there. So Sam says it wouldn't do any good for that, and Sam then goes to his therapist, who asks him how he's doing. He says it's fine. He says he doesn't know what he's expected to do. The man says nothing. Sam says he is, because why else would he be with the head doctor? He wants him to talk about Alice and all that, and he says he won't unless he wants to. He says he needs to be back with the regiment, and the doctor says that's not going to happen until he's cleared him, and he knows that, and Sam says he doesn't want to talk about her, and the man asks why not. So clearly something happened with Alice that we don't know about, and Julian's then driving to Kankuk. He meets with a man named Stefan Anderson and thanks him for meeting him, and Stefan says he's not the only one who traveled over 1,000 miles to be there. He says he's not quite sure why he wanted to meet with him, since he didn't give much away in his email, and Julian asks to go inside since he's not used to the heat, says he's looking for someone, and tells him about the 2 girls being held prisoner in a basement for more than 10 years, and says he needs to find the man responsible and track him down, and Stefan asks what this has to do with him. So Julian says he needs to find someone to drive him from here to Azwaya, and Stefan says crossing the border into Iraq is a pretty good way to get himself killed. So Julian says he's done it plenty of times, and Stefan says he's done his research. Julian says he read his articles because he admires his writing and courage, and Stefan says he chooses what risks he takes and does not take them lightly. But when he does, they're his alone, and he asks what he's supposed to tell his family if he doesn't come back, and how's he supposed to tell them that he took someone with no experience of the region and with no playing into the Iraqi desert, right between 2 groups of people whose sole ambition into this life is to kill one another. And Julian says he could tell them that he had 2 choices: to do nothing or to do something. They can, go home with the people involved in the conflict, could all decide to go home and forget their troubles, but they don't. They continue to walk down the storm to plant apple trees while the world burns down around them. So to do nothing, to do something is not a choice at all, which I think is what Julian has realized in these 2 years, that he's realized that he needs to close this case because he needs to satisfy everyone. He can't keep unsatisfying. He needs to close cases. He needs to do things, even if, they're not exactly the safest thing to do, he still needs to do them. So we can definitely see that there definitely has been some sort of spark with Julian. We still don't really know what that's about. So Steven says he's sorry, contrary to what he might think about him. Risks are the last thing he wants to take, and Julian says he's going to as Waya with his help or without it. So Julian walks out and gives him a recommendation of Oran Ascari, who is this fixer that the router guys sway by. He runs a place called Sunshine Travel, and they have an office right by the Citadel, and Julian thanks him, goes to find him. He calls Celia, and things are not great between them, to say the least. I mean, Celia doesn't want him there. She says that, he should only call her if he is playing on leaving. So clearly things are not good there. We don't know exactly what happened, but she's not happy that he's there, and probably because it's so unsafe. But he goes to meet with Ascari, instead finds his brother named Yardel, who's taking over the place while Ascari is on a tour, and he says he may be able to help. He sits down, tells him where he wants to go, and Yardel says it's not safe, but it can be done for 5k, which is non-negotiable, and Julian says he only has dinars, which of course is French money, and Yardel says the border guards will only look the other way for dollars, and gives him directions to a bank not far from there. Julian asks when they leave. Yardel says this afternoon, and Julian leaves. So Matthew's then with the junkies, anxiously awaiting for the dealer. He sees this woman, goes up to her, asks where she's going, tells her to open the door. One of the junkies says he's finally growing some balls, and we don't know what's going on there, but he's like literally screaming at this woman to to get out. But Gemma leaves a voicemail for Matthew, says they're going to go visit Alice this afternoon, and she knows he usually goes on his own, but thought it would be nice for them to all go together, and asks him what he thinks. So she hangs up the phone. We see she's looking at pictures of a girl and her family on a roller coaster. We don't know what that's all about, but Sam says he shouldn't have done what he did. It was a dumb mistake, but all this modified assessment crap is just a waste of time. And Julian goes to the bank, collects money to give to Yardel. He goes to a marketplace where he spots this man that freaks him out, and he does what he can to run away from him, even going as far as to get this metal pipe to hit him with, which was a very well done, intense scene that Takeki Kario just acted the hell out of here. He did an incredible job. So Matthew goes to Gemma, says he's ready to see Alice, despite Gemma's insisting they should wait for Sam, who's having an affair with Eve, we realize, and this is the part where I don't buy this at all. I just don't buy that Sam would have an affair with her, and he tells her he can't keep coming around. She tells him not to. He says he should get a hotel next time. He then gets a call from Gemma, and she tells him he should go. He says he has to shower first, then sees a sonogram from 2 years ago and is about to throw it away, but instead she puts it into a drawer. So clearly something happened with her child. I'm assuming she had an abortion. I don't know if that's true, but at least I'm willing to bet she had an abortion because she's clearly trying to hide it from Sam and he doesn't know. So then we get the most interesting revelation of all, which this definitely, I like this twist, but I don't know if we need in this episode, because we see Jem and Matthew, they go to a cemetery, and we find out that Alice has apparently died, but she's died on December 22nd, 2014. So there's definitely something wrong, with the Alice that has returned. There's definitely something off about her. We don't know what that's about, but it was definitely a very well done twist. I like the way that was done, but I feel like it didn't really work with this, especially when we have the past storyline going on. This just kind of felt overstuffed. It felt like they just kind of threw this twist in here to give us more doubts about what's going on, when really there were easier ways to do that, and I just felt this was kind of just a dumb way of teasing that the Alice that came back is not the same Alice Webster that was abducted. There's definitely more to her than that, and we definitely see that here. So Julian goes to Yardel, obviously in a huff, because, he literally just tried to get him killed, and basically, he's ready to call up his brother and says he tried to get him killed and everything, but Yardel asks what he means. Julian says he sent him to the bank to withdraw a large amount of money, and moments later he's being followed, and Yardel asks if he thinks all of them have thieves, and Julian says he's simply saying things as he sees them. He doesn't know if it's true, but at least from what he's gathered, it seems that Yardel was the one responsible for that. So Sam goes to meet with his family. Gemma goes to him, asks if he's coming down. He says he's not. He says he's seen the way she looks at him, still hasn't forgiven him, and she says he hasn't forgiven himself. So again, something happened between Matthew and Sam. We don't know what it is, but she gets a call from Julian, who calls to let her know he arrived. She asks if he really thinks he's going to find something out there, and he says he wouldn't have come if he didn't, and she says she knows. She says she wants to believe him, it's just hard, and he asks if she's still doing what he asked with the photographs. She says that she is when she can, and she says if her family knew what she was doing, they'd think she lost her mind, and he says she hasn't. She asks if he ever feels like his family's slipping away from him, and he says that they only feel that way because they want to hold them close. So you can tell that Julian eventually does find the family and definitely does strike up a relationship with them, but again, I feel like this would have been a lot more effective if we had seen Julian before. It just feels kind of weird that this is the first interaction we get between Julian and the family. Just, it feels like something's off there. But Matthew's at the cemetery, tells Alice's grave he hasn't forgotten her promise to him. So again, there's something funky going on there that we don't know, but Julian's in a hotel, meets with Stefan, and explains to him how he was followed when he went to the bank. He thought he was set up, and now he's unsure. He always tries to see the best in people, but the problem is they continue to disappoint him, and Stefan then agrees to take him to Azwaya. He thought about what he said and was right, and if he didn't follow him, he wouldn't be doing his job. Julian says that's why he puts his faith in people, and Stefan says to give him a couple weeks to put it all together. Julian says he has to be there tomorrow morning, and Stefan says that won't work. He needs to ask for the best route, find out where the troops are, get a good fixer, and Julian says that he may not have weeks because he's actually dying of brain cancer, we find out, which that makes sense why he's bald and doesn't have a beard, obviously because he's dying. So he has to begin taking them tomorrow. Stefan says he'll make some calls and ask who the man is that they're looking for, and Julian says a former soldier named Daniel Reed, who is the same man in the past who we know was cleaning up the stain, the blood stain, and also attended that funeral for his father. So he feels Daniel Reed is the man responsible for kidnapping these girls. So Julian and Stefan then pack up to go to Azwaya, and Julian says that when Alice returned, people said she was free as a bird, by saying that he never truly understood that, since birds are high up in the trees protecting their nests from predators, and no one is free in this world. Says the girl that came back all those years ago, kept in her basement, she wasn't free, and when she left that place, she was still a prisoner. Most importantly, he believes that girl was not Alice Webster, which is also intercut with that scene of Gemma and Sam finding Alice on the floor, and that is the way this episode ends. But let's just get into this episode and where I think we're really going to go this series. So overall, I thought this was a very well done premiere. I thought they did a very good job with setting this up, especially with how different it really was in Season 1. Because Season 1, it was a typical, rescue mission where they're trying to track down their lost son and things like that. It was, sure, that's what it was. It was a story of abduction, but there's so much more going on than it appears to be, which I really do love that about Series 2, the way they really did up the ante here, with instead of them looking for their son, they've already found their daughter. Their daughter has unexpectedly returned. They don't know how she's returned, but somehow she's alive. There's a lot of stuff they're dealing with. She could possibly be pregnant. She was abducted by this man who, possibly raped, clearly raped her and possibly impregnated her as well. She doesn't remember a lot of things, but there was also this other girl, Sophie, and we don't know how Sophie really fits into this, but from Julian saying, it just seems like this Alice is not the same Alice Webster, so that story definitely is very compelling. I'm interested in seeing where that's going to go. There are a lot of things, though, that they did very well, that they set up, with how this is not the same Alice, the way that she kind of rejects affection from her parents, or the way that she keeps, leaving them out of certain details. So we don't really know what this is all about. If she really is Alice Webster, or if she thinks she's Alice Webster. We don't really know. There's something off about this girl, and I can't wait to get more into that part of the story. That thing is definitely very interesting, and I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see, where that story really ends up going is, how did Alice, run away? What happened to her? And is Daniel Reed really capable of doing such a thing? We know absolutely nothing about Daniel Reed right now. We know there's a woman that, he doesn't want there. That's at his father's funeral. We don't know who she is, but Daniel Reed, he just, I don't know, it doesn't seem like that's the guy who can do this sort of thing. And I really hope this doesn't turn into like a race sort of situation, because I just don't want the show to do that. But there's already so much going on, but, I definitely think that's interesting. And then, of course, you have Julian, who he is very wary about pursuing this case again. We don't really know if he's going to get back in and things like that. There's a lot of doubts about what's going to happen there. The problem is, all of these storylines, we kind of know the ending to already. Why? Because we know what's going to happen in 2016. And that really did throw me off in this episode, because as much as I understand that Season 1 did do the 2-timeline situation, I actually think it would have been a more admirable and just a more shocking move to stick in one timeline. Everyone would be so confused. Why are we only sticking in one timeline? This show always does, has done 2 timelines in the first series. Why are we just sticking in one? It would have actually stood out more. It would have made the hour even more compelling. And you can't say they didn't have enough to build an entire hour on, because they did. There was a lot going on that they could have easily done. They could have shown more. Yeah, maybe it would have dragged a little bit, but it still would have been a nice setup to what was going on. I think they still had enough there to set things up. We really didn't get to spend as much time with Eve's father in this episode. Maybe we would have gotten to learn more about Adrian. I'm sure we will within the 7 episodes, but we just didn't see a lot of him here, and I'm sure we'll get more of him later. But now that we are in 2016, we know a lot of what's going to happen. And I do think there is some interesting stuff here. I really don't think we need to know, though, that this Alice Webster supposedly is dead. We really don't need to know that. And I don't know if that means that she faked her death and Matthew knows something that everyone doesn't, because the way he talks about her, it doesn't seem like she's dead. It seems like she's still out there and she faked her death for some reason. Maybe because she didn't want, the public surrounding her. Maybe it has something to do with that, because as we know, Adrian's doing what he can to try to, to cover up her identity as best as he can. So maybe it did leak out and she's trying to get away from it all. We don't really know. I mean, she doesn't want all this media coverage after, which is completely understandable. After you've been through something as traumatic as what she has, that makes complete sense to me why something like that would happen. So I don't know if it's about that or if she really wasn't the same girl. I mean, there's definitely something going on, and whatever it is definitely creates some sort of rift between Matthew and Sam, which that I am definitely interested in getting into, is what really caused this tension between them, which I think they could have set up quite well in the first episode without actually alluding to that happening. They could have easily had a scene between Matthew and Sam where we see them happy and things like that. So when they do start to have that rift, that compels us more. But there really wasn't anything between Matthew and Sam that really made me think that these two, that there's anything really going on with them, because they didn't really show anything with Matthew in the past, and I think they could have easily done that. Because by cutting to the present, as much as I did like them doing that, imagine how much more shocking it would be if the first 4 episodes were all 2014 and then the last 4 episodes were in 2016. I think that would have made a lot more sense if they would have done that. They have 8 episodes. Utilize that shorter, utilize the short amount of episodes. Do what you can to do that. That's something that Fargo did extremely well, is that they had that random time jump, in the second half of the season. Yeah, it was jarring at first, but it actually worked very well and played to the show's strengths, and I feel like The Missing could have done that very well. It would have actually made for a much more compelling season, because as much as I did like the stuff going on in 2016, I didn't need to know all that stuff. I didn't need to know that Julian is dying of brain cancer. I didn't need to know that things aren't great between him and Celia. I especially did not need to know that Sam is having an affair with Eve. I thought that was completely unnecessary. I don't like this at all. I think that's only there because they had, Tony and Emily divorced in series 1, so they figured they had to do something like that here, and they really didn't. Again, they could have easily changed that up. I don't know why he would do that. It just doesn't seem like something that, at least in the Sam we see in the first episode, we know zero to nothing about him, but it just doesn't seem like something he'd do. So I was quite confused as to why they decided to go in that direction, and that was very weird to me. This first episode was very focused on Julian, which I did like seeing. I like that Julian is a main lead in this. He was mainly in the first season, but it seems like he's even more focused in this season. He's the thing that really connects this entire series together. His, just his, him still being a little bit traumatized from the him feeling, not traumatized, but him feeling unsatisfied by what happened with Oliver. I thought that was extremely well done. All that stuff was really good. But again, the stuff in 2016, I just didn't need to know yet. I think we just got a little too much what was going on in 2016. They could have divided the episode up more, but there was so much going on in 2016, I don't think there was as much going on in 2014. There really was not. There just wasn't as much going on there, and I feel like they could have focused a lot more on what was going on in 2014. However, I did think this episode did an incredible job of setting things up. This mystery that they have going on, I'm extremely compelled by. I can't wait to see where they're going to go with it, and any doubts I have about this season, I really don't have now. I still am very interested in seeing where they're going to go here. There were some incredible things that they did with the visuals in the show, and especially with character work. They did such a great job with the character work. Like I said, the show really does care about its characters, and it's very much about, yes, it is about losing a child, but it's also about grief and really going into the introspective sides and things like that. The show is very introspective in that way, and I really do love the way the show dives deep into these characters. And even though, we don't know a ton about them, we can tell what they've been through, we can tell the trauma that this really is for them, and I do definitely want to find out more about these characters, because right now, the only characters we really know stuff about is Julian and Alice. That's really it. But I do definitely want to find out more about them as the episodes progress, so I'm interested in seeing where that's going to go. Also, constantly throughout this episode, they kept saying 2016, 2014. And I don't know if they think viewers are dumb, but I know the difference between 2014 and 2016 just from the haircuts. I mean, that was such a brilliant move that Gemma, has a shorter haircut in 2016. 2014, she has longer hair. Julian is bald in 2016, and 2014, he looks as we know him. So they really didn't need those constant time cards as to where we were. I know exactly where we are. You don't have to tell me every 30 seconds. It just felt like they thought the audience was stupid, that the audience wasn't paying attention. It was kind of dumb the way they did that. But overall, guys, I definitely did overall really like this premiere. I thought the actors were really good. I can't really say much about the acting because they definitely did do stuff with them, but I just feel like the characters in general, they didn't really do a ton with yet. We're only in the first episode. I just feel they could have done a little bit more with the timelines. They could have easily utilized them a bit more, but I still was very impressed where they're going. I give them props for doing something a little bit different than Series 1 because it definitely is a much more compelling series. I can see how it's going to get convoluted. I hope it doesn't get convoluted. I'm worried it is, but we'll have to see what ends up happening with that. But I am overall going to give the series premiere The Missing Series 2, Episode 1, Come Home, a 4 out of 5 or a B+. So for guys, maybe The Missing, let me know what you guys thought of this first episode overall. Loved your thoughts on it. Did you like the two timelines? Did you feel they could have easily divided into 4 different episodes? I think they really could have done that very well. What do you think is going on with Alice? If you guys have seen this season, I know the entire season is on Stars. I'm not going to be able to binge it. I'm probably just going to do once a week. I just don't have the time to binge it, unfortunately. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys thought of this premiere. Loved your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next, which would be for the mid-season premiere of The Walking Dead. Mid-season premiere. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.